When Jasmine eventually took center stage, the cameras were rolling, the music was tense, and viewers could practically feel the atmosphere growing heavier. Rumors of hidden entanglements and polyamorous relationships had been circulating through Atlanta for weeks, and Rasheeda Frost was caught in the midst of yet another tempest. This time, however, it was about a startling encounter that would rock the Frost home to its foundation rather than Kirk's previous scandals. Without hesitancy, but with audacity, Jasmine came forward to vindicate her name and put an end to persistent falsehoods. Everyone's gaze shifted to Kirk as she spoke. Fans couldn't help but wonder if the man who had been at the center of innumerable scandals was sitting stone-faced and almost too quiet out of shock, guilt, or just another attempt to avoid responsibility. Rasheeda's face conveyed a completely different message. Her eyes flitted with shock, rage, and the weariness of a woman who had heard too many scandals. The tension became intolerable, the room heated up, and the words that Jasmine uttered only served to fan the flames. This revelation had the potential to completely upend a marriage. It was no longer merely a casual rumor. Like a razor, Jasmine's voice sliced through the tension. Her words weren't unsure, and her tone wasn't shaking. This was a woman who had decided she would not allow anyone else to share her experience. "Why would I hide it if I was in something like that?" she said, meeting Rasheeda's gaze. "I don't conceal my identity. Never have I. I put everything out there, and everyone knows it. Why then would I now start harboring secrets?" After she finished speaking, there was an almost intolerable quiet. Every side-eye, twitch, and micro-expression was captured by the cameras as they panned across the room. Rasheeda had a furious expression. She appeared momentarily stunned, then irate, then exhausted once again. That sight was familiar to anyone who had followed her journey over the years. It was the expression of a woman who had endured more public humiliation than she could remember and was now ensnared in a plot she had not requested. Then there was Kirk. Usually, this man always had a ready-made justification, or a clever remark to try to deflect the attention or relieve tension. However, he sat quietly tonight, his lips squeezed together and his body language reserved. His dropped gaze and folded arms shouted avoidance, and onlookers saw it right away. Social media was ablaze with fan activity just minutes after the program premiered. "Kirk, why are you so quiet?" One comment said, "His silence speaks for itself," someone else added. Memes depicting Kirk sitting in a courtroom chair, akin to a man refusing to testify against himself, were even uploaded by others. Rasheeda was at her breaking point. Her voice was a mix of desperation and rage as she leaned in his direction. "Are you simply going to sit here? You have nothing to say after all of this, when my name is being dragged through the mud once more? Not one?" At the end, her words faltered a little, revealing the suffering that lay beneath the rage. Kirk moved around in his chair but remained silent. He gave a slight shrug as though he thought dismissing it would make it all go away. However, it didn't. The gravity of Jasmine's charges was further increased by his silence. Fans subsequently characterized the quiet as louder than a confession. Jasmine wasn't going to stop there either. With her eyes flaming, she leaned forward and gave the flames another twist. "Let's be honest. It wasn't by chance that my name ended up in this gossip. It was placed there by someone. Someone wanted this to go out there. Yandy was that someone." Her remarks caused the room to virtually vibrate. Rasheeda's face flashed with disbelief as her head snapped up. Yandy? Yandy? Of all people? She had trusted this woman, shared tears and laughter with her, and broken bread with her. She was now being portrayed by Jasmine as the puppeteer who stirred turmoil, manipulated narratives, and pulled strings from the shadows. Jasmine went on, her voice firm but piercing. "She sat with me, chatted too much, and gave the impression that I was involved in something that I wasn't. And for a moment, I nearly questioned my own abilities. I wondered if I had said something incorrectly as I left. But after mentally reliving everything, I saw that she was merely trying to make it appear different. She desired to write a narrative." Rasheeda's mouth clenched. Her voice rose as she turned to stare at Kirk. "Have you heard? See what people are saying about us? Concerning me? And you're simply going to sit there as if this is all unimportant?" Kirk's lips hardly moved, though. His gaze flicked down at the floor and then briefly at Jasmine. This time, the man who had previously attempted to use charm to get out of several scandals had nothing. Not even a rejection. Not even a thin pretext. The piercing snap reverberated across the room as Rasheeda slapped her hand against the armrest. The cameras captured her every moment as her patience was ebbing. Viewers at home could sense her annoyance coming through the screen. It was unvarnished, untidy, and intimate. It wasn't simply television drama. Jasmine, meantime, reclined back in her chair and smirked, which only served to fan the flames. She was aware of the impact of her words. She was aware that Kirk's silence was just as damaging as any charge she could level. All I'm saying is, why pretend if it was actually happening? What's the point of pretending it's some secret? Be mature if you're mature. However, if it isn't authentic, don't include my name. Rasheeda glared at her with a diamond-cutting intensity. Don't just sit there and pretend that nothing is wrong with you. When you allowed such conversations to continue, you were acting with knowledge. You allowed yourself to become involved in this disaster? Jasmine, however, did not recoil. Calm yet unyielding, she cocked her head. No, I just defended myself. I chose not to let anyone else to define who I am. You're mistaken if you believe I wanted to be a part of this plot, but I might as well be honest because my name is already known. There was an electric tension between the two women. Years of history, suspicion, and treachery were woven into every word, glance, and pause. Kirk sat silently in the midst of it all, fading into the background as though he was expecting the storm would blow over him. The storm, however, was not moving. There were more and more whispers outside that chamber. Fans, friends, and co-stars were assembling their own theories. Because of her directness, Jasmine was seen as more credible by some. Some contended that she was attempting to get attention and guarantee her place in the plot by stirring up controversy. After that, some people began to suspect Yandy, wondering whether she had really sowed seedlings to divert attention from her own marital problems. One thing was certain, though, regardless of your theory, the Frost marriage was once more being put to the test in front of millions of people. And this time, everyone could see the fissures in their foundation. Rasheeda's tolerance was clearly wearing thin, and her rage was genuine and unfiltered. Kirk's silence was damning as well as annoying. Furthermore, Jasmine's audacity ensured that there was no turning back. The tension in the incident continued. Everyone kept thinking about Jasmine's remarks as the evening went on. Why conceal it if it was taking place? She had stated. Fans analyzed the line incessantly. Some saw it as Jasmine's last straw to end the myth, while others saw it as her challenge to the Frosts to acknowledge the reality. Rasheeda's expression, which was captured on tape for all time, conveyed the story of a woman who was fed up with defending her marriage and unsure of how much longer she could battle. Upon the camera's departure, viewers were left with a lot of unanswered questions. Why didn't Kirk say anything? Was Jasmine causing trouble, or was she really revealing something? Was Jasmine deflecting, or was Yandy actually pulling strings? Above all, would Rasheeda be able to withstand another round of treachery, gossip, and unsolved questions? The consequences of Jasmine's remarks extended beyond that particular room. After the video went viral, it became the main topic of every discussion, both on and off screen. Like detectives, viewers examined it, each one certain they knew the truth. Memes, hashtags, and never-ending discussions about what Jasmine truly meant and why Kirk sat silent were all over social media. Many fans saw that quiet as evidence that there was more to the tale than anyone was acknowledging, not as a protective tactic. The energy was quite different at the Frost home. Rasheeda found it impossible to let go. With the rage of a woman who had experienced this cycle too often, she confronted Kirk after the cameras had stopped recording. You believe that by remaining silent, you are innocent? Her voice was fierce but quiet as she asked him. It just makes me appear foolish once. Again, Kirk sighed deeply and wiped his face, but his sentences were deliberate and slow. Not feeding it is sometimes the best course of action. It just gets bigger if I start talking. Rasheeda, however, didn't believe it. Her annoyance boiled over, as her eyes narrowed. No. Protecting your marriage is the best course of action. When someone tells a falsehood in front of you, it's preferable to stop them. You do not simply sit there as if you have been apprehended. The altercation went beyond that point, according to fans who said they heard them at subsequent events. According to reports, Rasheeda confided in friends that she felt abandoned by her husband, and that Kirk retreated into the background while she was forced to fight alone each time her name was dragged through the dirt. As rumors of a divorce began to resurface, people began to wonder if this incident would be the one to finally push Rasheeda over the edge. Jasmine appeared to be flourishing in the midst of the mayhem. She was doubling down, not running away or turning around. She reiterated what she had said in front of Rasheeda during a get-together with several other cast members. "I wouldn't hide it if it was happening. I'm not like that." She then revealed a twist that astounded everyone. "If anything, I believe that some of the folks here are more concerned with their own circumstances and are trying to divert my attention." Yandy was the target of an overt jab. Yandy shifted the focus in a way that caused people to doubt everything, by hinting that her marriage was in difficulty and that she was placing the blame on Jasmine. And the flames spread much further when Yandy learned of this. Yandy was determined not to have her name dragged without a reply. "Look, Jasmine can say what she wants, but I don't put people's business out there," she retorted in a confessional-style section. "It's her fault if she feels guilty. For the sake of deflecting, don't bring up my marriage." Fans were divided over who was telling the truth as a result of the back and forth, which gave rise to a whole new dispute. Kirk stayed out of the spotlight during all of this, avoiding interviews, remarks, and direct eye contact. He was evasive when he did speak in public. "People are free to speak whatever they wish. All that matters is that I am aware of my reality." However, their remarks merely fanned the flames. Why not tell his truth if he knew it? While everyone else speculated, why allow his wife get caught up in the whirlwind? Rasheeda's response was much more obvious. She posted cryptic messages on social media, including words about self-respect, loyalty, and being fed up with lies. Fans assumed she was making subtle jabs at her husband and instantly connected every word to Kirk. "Silence is still an answer. And sometimes it's the worst one," one message said. Thousands of followers flooded the comment section, telling her she deserved more, begging her to break up with him, and predicting that this was the beginning of the end. Rasheeda wasn't explicitly expressing her intention to leave, though. She maintained her poise while on camera, portraying herself as a resilient entrepreneur who would not allow scandal to define her. However, Jasmine's remarks had caused a deeper wound than most people recognized, and beneath that power lay a very real fragility. Tensions reached a breaking point at the subsequent group activity. Rasheeda remained distant, and Jasmine appeared unconcerned. Kirk avoided looking at any of the women as he hovered in the center. There was a lot of excitement in the air, and sparks flew quickly. Rasheeda eventually yelled at Jasmine across the room, "You have a lot to say when I'm not around. Why don't you tell me straight out now?" Jasmine didn't think twice. Her voice was quiet but sharp as she walked straight up. "I did it already. You simply do not wish to listen to it. I was telling the truth. I wouldn't conceal anything if it were happening. And perhaps you should look a little closer to home if you believe that I am the issue." The tension was so high that it was choking the audience as they gasped. Rasheeda's eyes blazed, her face stiffened. "You have no right to try to force this on me. You entered my marriage and my life, and now you're playing the victim? No, ma'am. This isn't how it operates." Jasmine, however, was not going to back down. "I wasn't involved in your marriage. Even before my name was spoken, your marriage was already in ruins. Don't hold me responsible for the damage already done." "This is crazy, man," Kirk said under his breath as he shifted uneasily, but his attempt to defuse the situation just made it worse. With an incredulous tone in her voice, Rasheeda whirled around him. "Oh, you have something to say now. Now you want to say something when it suits you?" With all eyes on Kirk, the room became silent once more. However, he clammed up again, refusing to elaborate and shaking his head. Everyone became even more suspicious as the pattern continued, with accusations flying, feelings erupting, and Kirk withdrawing into silence. The Frost marriage appeared more precarious than ever by the conclusion of the evening. With her head held high, Jasmine left, her reputation both called into doubt and cemented. Angry at being pulled into a disaster that she maintained wasn't hers, Yandy screamed from the sidelines. And once more, Rasheeda found herself standing in the ruins of her husband's silence, her rage growing stronger by the second. Online fans summed it up perfectly when they wrote, "Kirk's silence is what burned the house down, even though Jasmine may have started the fire." The repercussions of that altercation continued after the event. Everyone in the love and hip-hop circle had an opinion by the following morning, and phones were ringing and group chats were booming. Some friends messaged Jasmine for her side, some called Rasheeda to see how she was doing, and some discreetly contacted Kirk to ask why he had remained silent when the whole scenario begged for explanation. The pressure was too much for Rasheeda to handle. Not only was her marriage being scrutinized once more, but her friendships, devotion was also being called into doubt. She shook her head as she sat at the kitchen table with her cousin, reading internet comments. She whispered, "I can't do this any longer. Every time I begin rebuilding, another thing goes wrong." Her relative tried to reassure her by leaning in. "In any case, people will gossip. However, you can't continue to let him act as like nothing is going on, sis. This marriage has been carried by you. He must eventually battle for it as well." Rasheeda's eyes filled with tears, but she brushed them away right away. "I'm so over feeling ashamed. I'm sick of having people laugh at me as if I'm a complete idiot." He simply sits there, behaving as though nothing can be done but quiet. Jasmine, meanwhile, was not slowing down. She was seen at another event, confidently, sipping her drink as the conversation subject centered on her. She smirked and arched an eyebrow when someone questioned her about why she believed Kirk was silent. Perhaps quiet is a response. Perhaps he isn't refuting it because he is aware of its veracity. Her remarks, which were rife with insinuation, shocked the gathering. It fueled the gossip mill even further, whether she meant it as fact or just shade. In contrast, Yandy had had enough. Her voice was sharp when she phoned Bambi on the phone. "She won't keep bringing up my name in this situation. My life, marriage, and issues are all mine. Why does she insist that I fabricate stories?" Even Bambi acknowledged that Jasmine wasn't holding back despite her attempts to act as a mediator. "Look, I believe she is only trying to express her opinions. I won't lie, though. Her speech makes you appear to be the villain." Yandy was enraged. "I'm not going to stand by and let someone pretend that I'm responsible for all of this. I will have to inspect her myself if she continues to mention my name." Kirk tried to remain calm back at the Frost house, but the walls were closing in. Rasheeda faced him once more, her emotions exploding. "Are you even concerned about my current appearance? Are you bothered by the rumors that I'm in a shady relationship and that I'm allowing women to treat me badly on camera?" Kirk rubbed his temples and let out a deep breath. "I'm concerned. I care, of course. However, I will not allow myself to get drawn into every dispute. Sometimes it's best to say nothing." Rasheeda's scream rose as she slapped her hand down on the counter. "No! People assume you're guilty when you remain silent. My silence gives the impression that I'm standing here supporting a man who isn't even willing to defend himself. Kirk, you've endured too much for me. Too much." The hurt of years of betrayal seeped out of her words as they broke in mid-sentence. Kirk still refused to give her what she desired. He didn't become agitated or apologize profusely. Rather, he shrugged and muttered, "People will always gossip. Permit them." Rasheeda shared another strange comment on social media that evening. "A woman has a limit to how much she can bear before she lets it go." Support exploded in the comments section as fans quickly conjectured it was about Kirk. "Queen, leave him. You're worthy of better." Kirk's quiet says 1,000 words. The Frosts weren't the only ones impacted as the days went by. Their children started to pick up on the stress and asked questions that Rasheeda found difficult to respond to. The couple's son witnessed disagreements and questioned, "Why is everyone saying bad things about Dad?" according to a close family member. Rasheeda's anguish at hearing that question conveyed the tale of a lady divided between facing her truth and defending her children. Jasmine, on the other hand, leaned into the confusion. In a subtly suggestive interview, she stated, "I'm not here to break anyone's marriage. I simply won't be portrayed as someone I'm not. I will continue to defend myself if they wish to drag me about." Supporters were split. While some applauded her for her steadfastness, others charged that she was stoking a fire merely to garner publicity. Kirk's silence, however, became the main topic of every discussion. Even those who didn't think Jasmine was real started to question why he wouldn't simply deny it. Why not mention it if nothing happened? Fans never stopped tweeting. Others speculated that Kirk may have refrained from speaking because he didn't want to lie on television. The Frost marriage became the season's most talked about issue as the rumors only intensified. Producers ensured that Yandy, Jasmine, and the Frosts were in the same area at the subsequent shoot. The air was thick with expectancy and the tension was intense. Yandy showed up resolute, speaking firmly as she walked up to Jasmine. "I don't like that you've included me in your mess. I have my own hubby and my own life. Don't mention me by name." Jasmine grinned, her answer brimming with irony. "Oh, you're the victim now? It's funny that you're always interfering with other people's affairs. However, it's not your fault when it backfires." The room exploded. Rasheeda jumped in, already enraged from her own struggles. "You two should keep me out of this. Your plot is not about my marriage. We need to stop talking about me and us." Jasmine wasn't finished, though. "Then urge your spouse to speak up. As he sits there feeling bad, tell him to get up. Because everyone believes it because of his silence." Like smoke from an explosion, the words lingered in the air. Rasheeda froze, breathing heavily as her chest rose and fell. Everyone's eyes were on Kirk, pleading for him to finally speak. However, he didn't. "I don't need to prove anything to anybody," he said, shifting uneasily and rubbing his chin. The room was filled with gasps. Rasheeda's expression contorted, in shock. "Not to your wife, even?" Her voice broke as she asked. There was no denying the pain in her voice, and Kirk appeared on the verge of losing it for the first time. But rather than provide clarification, he turned and left, leaving the women in startled silence. The episode's turning point was that walkout. Immediately, fans proclaimed it the ultimate evidence of remorse on social media. Timelines were swamped with memes that depicted Kirk leaving with captions like, "The walk of shame," and "When silence is your only defense." With hashtags like "Rasheeda deserves" better circulating overnight, others conjectured that Rasheeda had finally reached her breaking point. Rasheeda's friends gathered around her behind the cameras, offering consolation as she dabbed at her tears. Clearly happy that her argument had been made, Jasmine stood back with her arms folded. Yandy said, "This is precisely what I didn't want," and shook her head. Everyone was shaken by the situation, which was an absolute tumult of emotions and accusations. But despite all, Kirk said nothing. His inability to stand up for himself and his wife turned into the season's biggest story. The storm had just begun, but the walkout left the room in startled silence. Rasheeda stood there trying to steady herself with shaking hands. Although she had previously experienced humiliation, this time it was different. This was more than just gossip at the club or a scandal in the blogosphere. This was her spouse leaving her in public, preferring to remain silent rather than to defend her. That moment was more painful than any rumor could have ever been. Rasheeda sat by herself later that evening, going through her phone and repeatedly watching the videos. Every aspect of Kirk's walkout was being discussed, analyzed, and ridiculed. While some fans drew attention to Rasheeda's sadness, others used his silence as a joke. She muttered to herself, "I've supported him through everything, and this is what I deserve." The weight of years of betrayal weighed heavily on her chest, causing the tears she had been fighting to contain all day to suddenly spill out and fall down her cheeks. Jasmine, meanwhile, was enjoying the aftershock. "I just told the truth," she said to a gathering of pals. "I only done that." Her bravado further stoked the controversy, and although some praised her for speaking her mind, others charged her with taking advantage of the rifts in the Frost marriage for her own publicity. If they can't handle it, that's not on me. In any case, Jasmine was aware that she had become the focus of the discussion, but Yandy was furious. In an angry tone, she summoned a meeting with several of her co-stars to clear her name. "I refuse to allow Jasmine to change the course of history. I will not tolerate her attempt to use me as a shield. Even though my marriage isn't perfect, I don't put others down to improve my own image." Although her remarks were powerful, the harm had already been done. Now, fans were interrogating her, dissecting every action, and speculating as to whether Or not she had indeed manipulated Jasmine as Jasmine alleged. The Frosts' body language said a lot the next time they were on camera. Rasheeda crossed her arms, sat rigidly, and spoke in a clipped voice. Kirk, meanwhile, spoke in nebulous generalizations that revealed little and avoided making eye contact. Rasheeda's expression darkened when a producer questioned her directly about the rumors. "I'll stop trying to justify myself. Ultimately, I am aware of my value. People are free to believe lies if they so want, but I can only be so patient." Kirk only continued, "People talk. They do just that." Rasheeda's eyes rolled so sharply at his nonchalant rejection that it was nearly audible. Online supporters rushed to her defense and showered her with supportive remarks. One fan said, "Sis, you don't need him." "Your silence is strength," said another. "He is weak if he doesn't speak." Their enterprises also started to feel the effects of the domestic stress. Rumors circulated among the staff members of their clothes store about arguments that took place behind closed doors, and some even asserted that Rasheeda had been attending, more frequently without Kirk. Outsiders perceived it as a change in power, with Rasheeda assuming leadership and Kirk fading into the background. However, a few weeks later, at a dinner gathering, the most shocking turn of events occurred. With drinks flowing and anxiety and humor mingling, the cast members gathered around the table. The subject that everyone had been avoiding at last came up again as the evening went on. When the word Polly was casually brought up, the table burst into uneasy laughing. Rasheeda only needed that to lose her temper. "Do you guys find this amusing?" Her voice cutting through the commotion, she demanded. "Do you guys believe that my marriage is a farce? I've endured far too much, and now I have to sit here and watch others laugh at untrue rumors?" Jasmine grinned as she reclined on her chair. "Why are you so pressed if it's not true? If it's only a lie, why does it affect you so much?" All eyes were bouncing between the two women as the room grew silent. Anger reddened Rasheeda's face. "Because I've endured years of disrespect. Because I have endured humiliation after humiliation while my name has been dragged. And you sit here today as arrogant as ever, pretending to be the victim? You have no idea what it's like to have to defend your marriage in front of everyone." Jasmine's tone remained stern, but her smirk subsided a little. "And perhaps you ought to consider why you have to keep fighting for it. I might not be the issue. Perhaps the person sitting next to you is the issue." The table let out a gasp. Rasheeda's gaze quickly shifted to Kirk, who was avoiding eye contact by looking down at his plate. "Speak out," Rasheeda yelled, her voice cracking beneath the strain of annoyance. "Now tell me that this is a falsehood. Inform them all that it is untrue." The cameras panned in on Kirk as they awaited his response. Everyone in the room held their breath. However, Kirk Frost remained silent once more. "I don't need to explain myself," he muttered, shifting in his chair and rubbing his chin. Then, with Rasheeda in tears and the rest of the cast in complete shock, he pulled back his chair and got to his feet. It was dubbed the season's most startling moment by fans. The internet was inundated with memes, with Rasheeda being dubbed the strong one left alone, and Kirk being dubbed the silent husband. People kept debating if Kirk was concealing something, or if he was just sick of adding to the drama. In any case, his silence came to represent every issue in their marriage. Rasheeda stopped wearing her wedding band in public in the days that followed. She was photographed by paparazzi at gatherings by herself, appearing fierce but aloof. Although she never confirmed it, her enigmatic messages only served to feed rumors that she was thinking about splitting up. One post said, "A woman's peace is priceless." Supporters showered the comments with advice, urging her to go and make her own decisions. Jasmine, however, took great pleasure in the attention, with remarks like "unbothered" and "truth always comes out." She shared selfies, which sparked countless arguments in the comments section. While some commended her bravery, others charged her with ruining a family. Yandy persisted in defending herself by blogging about honesty and loyalty, and denying any involvement in the mayhem. However, the Frosts continued to be at the center of the storm regardless of how the blame was assigned. The plot, the headline, and the question on everyone's mind once more revolved on their marriage. Would Rasheeda leave at last, or would she stick by Kirk in spite of his silence? Fans were left in a state of desperation as the season concluded, without any resolution. With her head held high, Rasheeda said, "I deserve better," as she left the last scene, and I am aware of it. Kirk remained behind, his eyes downcast as though he were bearing 1,000 unsaid thoughts, his silence more resolute than before. Knowing her place in the maelstrom, Jasmine grinned, and Yandy, angry and disappointed, promised to correct the record once and for all. The drama continued long after the credits had rolled. Fans are divided, and Rasheeda is at a crossroads, as a result of Kirk Frost's silence becoming the season's loudest news. Although Jasmine's audacious charges may have ignited the fire, Kirk's silence was what really converted rumors into a full-fledged conspiracy. The Frost marriage is still in jeopardy, Yandy's name is still entangled in the issue, and fans are always arguing about who is speaking the truth. There is no doubt that this story is far from over. Jasmine's unrepentant bravado, Kirk's walkouts, and Rasheeda's cryptic posts all hint at an impending storm. Will Rasheeda ultimately come to the conclusion that enough is enough? Will Kirk ever speak out in favor of his marriage again? And what is the true extent of Yandy's involvement? Everyone is asking these questions, and the answers could have a profound impact on Atlanta's love and hip-hop scene. However, what are your thoughts? Do you think Kirk is guilty for keeping quiet, or is he just fed up with gossip? Was Jasmine being honest, or was she merely stirring things up to get attention? Does Yandy need to elaborate farther than she is? Revealing? We would love to hear your opinions, so please leave a comment below. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the next exciting update, and if you're startled by how this drama played out, don't forget to hit the like button. If this season has taught us anything, it's that the drama only gets louder after the cameras stop. So turn on your notifications. You should pay close attention to this story, because the Frost's quiet today might turn into their biggest confession tomorrow.